for themselves. Now we'll have to see how they decide to round out this composition. Still a lot of options available for them. We'll have to see where they go.
I think Batiste here would be the most rounded jungler that you can pull out for Ace Gaming. Batiste fairly good into Alpha for the fact that he can stop her from engaging onto your carry with the Ordain. The Fearsome Shade can shut it down as well. Sky also struggles if you get her into that. Oh, this is so tricky because I know Tassa plays Crystal Power Arden jungle. He is one of the only people in this competition that is willing to pull that out at a regular stage. And so we don't know where this Lorelai's going. We don't know where this Arden's going.
We'll find out pretty soon, though, as we get into the first game of the day. I'm very much looking forward to it. Having these complexities in draft, having to... You don't even, at the end of draft, know where things are going to go. Just allows for that next level of strategy and for shot calling for both these teams. It's interesting to see Ace really now being the only representative left from East Asia in terms of, like, you've lost Rox, you've lost Detonation, it's up to Ace. They are an upstart team trying to challenge for that World Championship once again.
Not only that, we've had all 5 regions apart from East Asia qualify for the quarterfinals now, which is unprecedented in World's history so far.
Go EU, G2,
Yeah, for sure. It's an SA as well. Yeah. Impressive that Pain has made it there. This is, you know, so good. So Ace needs to win if they want to have East Asian representative in the rest of this tournament.
And it would be incredible to see them go out, because a lot of people said Rox and Ace were their 2 favorites, really, to get through to those finals and to take the championship. Hunters here on side A, Ace Gaming on side B. It's the first game of the day here for day 2 of the Vainglory World Championships, and I, for one, am incredibly excited. It looks like it's going to be CP Lorelei here for Ace Gaming.
Yeah, Tassa's going to be taking that to the jungle, has very quick clear speeds with the fish food. Your passive, which allows you to amp up your crystal power when you stand on one of those pools, means that you can take the jungle even quicker. And considering the fact that Water War on 2.10 has a pretty intense CP scaling, he's going to be providing huge shielding for creation. This is very much a hyper carry creation composition coming out of Ace. Youngju and Tassa will really just be looking to provide room for creation to maneuver around this guy, around this Alpha, and protect him when the engage does indefinitely come through from Godfather.
And we can already see the difference in decision-making between the 2 teams as well. Hunters had a 3-man group, went for the Elder Treant. Ace Gaming said, we don't want to take the risk of an early 3-man fight. We're just going to back away, let creation go up into the lane, and accept that we lose a small amount of gold, but we don't lose any lives because we don't go for the fight.
Yeah, and this is something that East Asia does very well. You mentioned earlier that Ace was brought together to kind of be the new powerhouse of East Asia, and so far they've shown that they're able to do that against Rox, Armada in their regular seasons. They're the summer and the autumn champions of East Asia, and so it's going to be very exciting to see how they face up against Hunters, who during the autumn season lost only a single match, and that was in the finals against Kraken. They won every series.
And a lot of people said, are Hunters actually as good as we think they are? Because we didn't see so much from the rest of the Chinese region. Well, Kraken went through from their group. So
as first.
Yeah, as first. Now, you have to really put Hunters up at a high regard in response to the rest of these teams. Once again, the Treant going over to Hunters there. Not really too much of a challenge from Ace Gaming. You know, you put the fish food down, maybe you steal it with that passive damage proc, but Ace happy enough to play a slower early game.
And it does look like Hunters are going to be going towards this double crystal power composition for themselves. Swagu, nope, I've talked too early. He's going Spell Sword Alpha in the jungle. That is something that we just have not seen here on 2.10. Users at home, of course, are going to recognize the Spell Sword buffs on 2.11. And I do think there's been some influencing of the 2.10 meta based on the current live patch. But Spell Sword Alpha is one of the only heroes that you actually can do that on 2.10 because of the fact that Alpha is such a cooldown reliant hero. The core stacks from your B allows you to stack up your damage. The weapon power version of Alpha has very strong mid to early to mid game power, and so Swagger is really going to look to try and make the most of it.
Now we see Ace actually going for a bit more of a fight around this Elder Treant. It would be the 3rd for Hunters, and once again they secure it. They might go in for the engage onto creation, but a good splashdown from Tessa will push them off for the time being. Hunter's still going aggressive here, looking for the damage on towards that Vox, but Swagoo is a little bit overextended perhaps. as Ace are just going to back away. The engagement from Harmonious,
Wow.
so he strikes all the way off towards the back line, getting the damage down with that forward barrage as well, and Tass is quite low. Hunters have forced Ace out of their own jungle.
And they're going to steal away all of these camps as well. This is such shutdown coming through from Hunters to put Tasser on the back foot here. Very, very clever gameplay coming out from them. And if we're going to talk about the stylistic differences between East Asia and China in Vainglory, East Asia, at least at the 2016 World Championships, were known for their immense aggression in the early game, but there's been a shift towards a very more calculated game style throughout the year, where they look to really play around objectives and power spikes instead of going just all in early aggression. China is still raw, unfiltered damage, really just looking for those fights, and this is a very stylistic difference, and it's very interesting to see how that plays out.
Oh, it definitely is, but you have to give Hunters the credit as well. It's not all about just going for every fight you see. There, they take a fight at the 3-minute 30 mark. They know the Crystal Sentry isn't up. They know they can push forward, and then they back out at 4 minutes to make sure that they aren't caught out by that jungle intensification. Swagoo doing a good amount of damage onto Youngju here as well. And that Arden should be safe for the time being. Let's have a quick look at these first items. It is Spell Sword on Swagoo. Creation's gone Poison Shiv first for himself. Youngju still sitting short of that fountain, whereas Godfather is going to be able to heal up his team. Harmonious now has the Dragon's Eye as well on this Crystal Power Sky.
And Tassa's going Aftershock on this Lorelei as well. There's a philosophy of thought on 2.10 that any jungler that can utilize Aftershock is top meta, and if your jungler can't utilize Aftershock, then build it anyway, because it's just such a strong item here. It provides so much utility. This is the first time I've ever seen an Aftershock built on a Lorelei before, and what this is going to allow Tassa to do is come in with his auto attacks after using maybe Splashdown to get his team into a team fight, and just be able to utilize his auto attack damage very efficiently. Often we see alternating current for that very reason, but his next item here potentially is going to be a Clockwork, which is going to mean his ability spammage is going to be very strong. He's going to have his Water Wall off cooldown quite often, and this is actually going to go towards that win condition of hyper carrying Creation, just making sure that he cannot die in team fights.
We have had a relatively slow early game here. It looks like Hunters are going to try and make a play around this turret, but Swagoo is going to take quite a lot of damage. The turret takes a chunk as well, down to about a quarter HP. Considering we're 6 minutes in without a first blood, Hunters have been able to develop a relatively strong gold lead, about 1,500 gold ahead now. And they are looking for a little bit more while they still have this extra power spike. The Death from Above isn't going to connect on towards Ace, but Youngju goes quite low here. Does have the fountain for his own if he needs it, so he's striking from Harmonious. But here comes the damage from Creation, gets the water wall as well with the shield. Youngju going in for the aggression, still not 6. Godfather is though, and he can arcane passage away from this fight. And Hunters maybe overextended ever so slightly there, but they don't pay for it too much.
Yeah, that was really clever from Ace to know that they just had to engage a fight if they wanted to push back Hunters. Now looking to get damage down on the turret alone. Oh my goodness.
One more Resonance Bounce would have been enough, but here comes Swagoo from the side. Does have that ultimate if he wants to jump into the back of the fight. The fountain used by Ace, and once again, Hunters have to retreat.
We're starting to see the interaction of Lorelei into Alpha here, especially a Weapon Power Alpha that needs to be auto-attacking for her main damage. Swagoo's being slowed down and not being able to actually get on top of Creation.
Ace now the ones on the front foot as they aggress towards the Hunter's turret. Both first turrets very low, but still no first blood, still no first objective take for either of these two teams. We've talked a little bit about how Ace Gaming want to ramp up this Vox. What is it that Hunters are trying to do as they get into the middle portion of this game?
Well, we're starting to see Harmonious get towards, or he has the gold, in fact, for a Clockwork here. And this was the turning point in the series against TSM, that game 1, where this Sky just became too hot to handle for the North American, lords. And right now, that's the point they've hit here. A Clockwork comes through. Harmonious will then build into a Broken Myth to amp up his piercing, so we can just really cut through Ace Gaming here. And if Hunters can have Swagoo on the front line just being a threat while Harmonious kind of dances around the team fight like he can do, then that's when they can start winning.
Here comes the engage once again from Hunters, forcing Tassa away. The Death from Above isn't going to land, and Youngju is going to be able to get off towards safety here as well. Does have the ultimate of his own, the fountain up for both the two teams. No Crucible on either of the roamers yet, though, so if some CC does connect, like onto Swagoo, he's going to be forced back. Creation almost gets the kill, but doesn't quite have the damage. Harmonious building up those Dragon Eye stacks up to 5 now, but Ace still relatively healthy in this fight.
I'm surprised that Youngju didn't want to pull the trigger there. It seemed like an opportunity to go straight on in. There's no Crucible yet for Godfather. He's gone Contraption, second item for the cooldown reduction on his sigil here.
And for like 4 scout traps in a tiny area as well.
Yeah.
Put them all down, Dowsy.
Well, that's also a threat though, because if you do dive on in with the Gauntlet, it restricts your area of team fight, and it's very potential that the scout traps can actually do a significant amount of damage. They've split Hunters here. Ace needs to look for an opening to try and put some damage onto Harmonious if they want to look to push this turret, and they're trying to push up.
Youngju may have overextended slightly, but it's just going to get forced back by Harmonious. There was a good bright bulwark from Godfather to stop Youngju being able to come in with the Gauntlet earlier on. Once again, these two teams just butting heads at the moment. It's important to remember that Hunters have already played TSM. They went 1-1 in that match. If they lose this series, they are very much in contention to be knocked out of the tournament before their tournament has really even begun. Ace Gaming, yet to play a series, are looking for their first win of Vainglory Worlds 2017.
And TSM and Ace went head-to-head at Mobile Masters only recently, where TSM came out on top. So you have to feel that TSM have some understanding of Ace's style of play here, and so they're going to be feeling at least confident that they can match up against the Korean giants in this tournament. But for Ace, a 2-0 would solidify their quarterfinals very heavily here, and they have a very good late game scaling composition as well.
Here comes Creation once again. The Death from Above comes down looking for the kill. The turret goes though, and now Swaggy needs to get in from the backline because Harmonious is already taking a chunk. Here comes Swaggy, Youngju looking for an engage.
Lovely.
So much healing coming out. Youngju still alive, so is Swaggy somehow in that black line. We'll get back towards the back of his turret. The turret, of course, has already fallen for Ace Gaming. They're looking to answer with one of their own, and Creation steps forward, but here comes the re-engage from Hunters onto Youngju. Creation doing a lot of work down onto Godfather in the bottom side. He's going to Arcane Patches away. A great fist food onto Harmonious will secure the first kill of the game for Ace, and they're looking for a lot more. Creation's going to jump in, looking for the triple. They can even get the ace here. Hunters have been caught totally off guard. The Fishery's not going to connect, but Tassa is not going to give up on this fight. It's great sustain from Godfather as he uses the Imperial Sigil to get away. It means that there should not be an ace here for Ace, but they should be able to take Godfather down eventually.
Yeah, and look at what Creation is doing, pushing the turret in so that they can at least try and utilize this advantage that they've got. Already one turret taken in that process. They've damaged the second, and now taking away jungle as well. Ace knows so well that when you win a team fight, even just by a margin, that you need to try and take as much of the map as possible. Godfather securing jungle is good for Hunters, keeping that gold on their side rather, but you know, that is experience taken away from Swagu, who's playing this early to mid power hero. Alpha in the weapon power format does fall off very heavily, and Ace Gaming is only going to continue scaling and scaling into the late game. Creation now going towards a third attack speed item, likely going to be a bone saw so he can cut through Swagger on the front line and then transfer the breaking point stacks he's built up onto either Harmonious or Godfather, and really just try and cut down this guy who is the single damage threat at this point from Hunters.
And look at Creation, just how well he's farmed this game. At 12 minutes, he's sitting on 130 CS. Both the laners, actually, Harmonious is almost there as well. It means they're almost up at these 4-item spikes. Very early in the game, considering it's been low kill and low objective. We haven't even seen a gold miner go down, and these teams are incredibly even coming into the 13-minute mark.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive coming out of Creation, 11 CS per minute roughly. It's above the average of, and above the CS that is available in the lane. That means he's stealing jungles away and really just pressuring Hunters at any given opportunity. Tassa as well is scaling very nicely here. Lorelei is a bit more of a secondary threat coming out of Ace Gaming because of the fact that she provides so much utility and protection for Creation, but those fish foods are starting to do some damage, and once that broken myth is completed, or even a dragon's eye, depending on what Tassa wants to prioritize here, then Hunters cannot afford to be getting caught in that CC.
Breaking point has been completed on Swagger as well, so the longer these fights go off, the more stacks he'll be able to build up on that. But we're looking at Creation and a Harmonious when these frays do erupt. They are the primary carries for these two teams, so watch them. If one of them goes down early in a fight, it could spell disaster for their team.
And can you believe it's only been 2 kills so far during this game, with 15 seconds in, and the gold is practically even. These teams have just been butting heads consistently, but not being able to break open any major objectives. The only advantage that Ace have over Hunters right now is the longevity of their composition here that they can realistically look to abuse, whereas Hunters desperately look for engages and fights.
Right, but what comes out, the wait for it as well has been used. Youngju in that front line, popping down the gauntlet. Swaggy needs to get out, but is stunned up by the cage, and now Ace can look for a bit more engage. Harmonious trying to back away, has those Dragon's Eye stacks though, and he's going to jump back in with the Suri Strike there, looking for the Artem, but they can't quite get there. Creation jumps all the way into the front line. Look at the healing, look at the shields on towards that Vox. It's all on Creation, it's all on Ace, and he's just going to dive the backline by himself on this Vox, gets himself a kill, and now they're looking for a little bit more as Creation dodging around, goes in with the Arcane Passage once again, but Swagyu's going to take him down. Perhaps a little bit of an overstep there from Ace as Hunters re-engage onto Youngju. Swagyu's still alive, but a great fish food will stun him up for the time being. Looking for a prime directive on towards that backline if he can get there. The healing coming out from Godfather. Youngju gets the water wall, but is that enough shielding to keep him alive for the time being? Because Tassa is low on energy, pops down a splashdown to try and get away. The prime directive still connects, and now Tassa hasn't really got an escape. Another splashdown, is it enough? It's not. The core charge will get the kill, and Hunters come out trumps in the fight.
Creation is just so cocky when it comes to his Vox, and he knows that almost certainly 90% of the time he will run at opponents and he will out damage them with his fantastic mechanical ability, but this time he bit off a piece of pie that he could not chew, and Hunters have been gifted a breath of air in this game. As the Kraken spawns as well, it's such an important time for Hunters to feel like they are still in it with a shot here, because this Kraken can really just shift the longevity of Ace Gaming's comp backwards and Hunters forwards, and really just shift that power in such a massive way. So for Hunters, this next team fight around the Kraken or wherever it may be is so important. Harmonious has just finished his Eve of Harvest as well, with the healing coming through from Lyra, the Crucible that's now being completed so they can all escape that gauntlet. There's so many things available for Hunters to take this next team fight win, and Ace Gaming have to be prepped for it.
And it's important to note, Creation and Tassa have no armor. So if Swagyu is surviving through these fights and getting those breaking point stacks, he will shred through Ace. It doesn't matter if you take down Harmonious if Swagyu is still very healthy at the end of the fight. But perhaps a little bit of an overextension from Creation in that last fight. He's now got Tornado Trigger. He's got that extra damage, got that extra crit. How effective can he be up against Hunters now?
This build is going to allow him to stack that breaking point so quickly. If he is able to do any consistent damage and then transfer it to Harmonious, it's only going to take a few auto attacks to kill this guy here. And so that means that not only is Harmonious's position so important, but so is Godfather's and Swagyu. If they want to start a fight up, then they have to be wary of the fact that Creation will use that front line to stack that breaking point up and then transfer straight into Harmonious.
Still no echo on towards the Arden though, so we're not going to see those Venn diagrams of death from Ace. He's gone War Treads instead, has the Fountain, has the Gauntlet, has all of the typical roam items for his team. 17 minutes in, and there's only 200 gold between these two powerhouses. The #1 team from Korea, the #1 team from China, showing exactly how evenly matched they are.
Certainly are, and Hunters right now are very much wary of the fact that their next team fight could be the one that wins them the game or the one that shuts them out for the rest of this matchup. And there's a ticking time bomb above their heads. It's only 100 gold until Creation completes that Tyrant's Monocle, completing this very offensive Vox build that he has drafted for himself. It is a very difficult to deal with a Vox that has an Arden for shielding and as well as a Lorelei. He can frontline so much damage here and really just tear down the defenses of Hunters. Harmonious needs to consider the fact that he has no armor against Creation here, a full crit build almost, and so he will be taking so much. That's where the Eve of Harvest comes up huge. That's where Godfather's healing has to be impactful, and Swagyu needs to create the space for Harmonious to shine.
Youngju is going to have that echo as well, so this, for the next team fight, it's about 50 gold away from it, so assuming it doesn't happen in the next 3 seconds or so, he should be able to back away.
He's going to buy it
and
now.
Get that echo. There we go. Next fight is the defining moment of this game. Hunters still just looking for that win. If they can take this, they almost at least guarantee themselves a tiebreaker later on.
And so far what we've been seeing in the last minute is Hunters hesitant to engage, knowing that it has to be perfect, but Ace Creation have just hit 2 major power spikes for their compensation, and they haven't been afraid to take fights either, meaning that Hunters may not get that golden opportunity they've been looking for, because Ace can now force a hand onto Hunters.
Infusions across the board as well. Harmonious yesterday against TSM, he did such an amazing job on this late game Crystal Power Sky. Here you feel he has to step up even bigger because Creation is at full build on this Vox.
Bright Bulwark is down for just 4 seconds more. Godfather needs to make sure those Bright Bulwarks are used perfectly to shut down the engage. Look at that damage that just comes out from Creation. Thankfully, Lyra is starting to hit the point where she can heal for burst heal for 700 damage, or health in fact, and so you know, you can protect, but here we go.
Mortal Wounds is going to proc on towards Godfire. Here comes the first gauntlet. The wait for it as well will lock out to Youngju, however, perhaps a bit overextended up towards the top side. Creation is chasing down on towards that Lyra. Tassa overextended. The first blood is going to go across towards Ace, but can Harmonious now get into this fray? Because it's Swagyu in the midst of 3 members of Ace, and he's going to fall as well. Harmonious has abandoned the rest of his team. Ace win the fight, and will look to take the Kraken as well.
And that is so scary for Hunters. The fact that Creation no longer needs to target Harmonious out of team fights because of this very offensive Vox build and the poison ship on top of it. He can run at a Lyra and execute her from the team fight. And once Lyra is
take down the Kraken, but 2 turrets for a Kraken is definitely worth it if you're Ace Gaming.
And what Youngju couldn't do was echo his gauntlet. He did use Echo recently. I believe he must have echoed one of his abilities there potentially.
It was the gauntlet in the last fight, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's a long cooldown. He hasn't hit the point where he's overdriven his ultimate for that cooldown reduction, and Echo in 2.10 was changed so that if you use it on an ability with a short cooldown, then Echo's cooldown is going to be much shorter than it was before, but for long, impactful cooldown abilities, its cooldown is even longer, just really trying to cut down some of the abusiveness that Echo can provide, especially for an Arden on 2.10, where the Venn diagram setup is still possible. Youngju needs to make sure that it's being used perfectly.
Harmonious has now switched to a metal jacket instead of boots here on the Sky.
This is something you can do on Sky, and often you see it on weapons to power Skies, particularly because you have such a high attack speed. Your stutter stepping with the heroic perk allows you to maneuver very quickly. It's much more difficult to do it on Crystal Power Sky because you aren't using your auto attacks as much, you're using your abilities, and so when you're using forward barrage, you don't have any movement, you're just having to hope you're cutting down your opponent, and so Harmonious is going to rely on Godfather's heals essentially as boots.
Stun onto Godfather, Deathmower is going to come down as well. Youngju off towards the top side of this fight, does have the Echo and the Gauntlet available alongside the Fountain. Here comes Creation up on those stacks, 6 Dragon's Eye, 10 on the Broken Myth. Now here comes the Gauntlet, they're looking for that Lyra, they're trying to take her down, the wait for it comes out, the block, not going to be enough, and now Swagyu is low, but he can try and engage on towards Creation, who has taken a lot of damage. Creation doing so much work in this fight though, and Ace Gaming able to shred down through 2 members of Hunters. They're looking for the third, they're looking for the ace, they're looking for the win. Great Fish Food will catch him out, and Ace take the ace and look for the win in this game.
Just nothing Harmonious could do there. Such a risky gambit to not have boots against a Vox who just wants to charge at you. A Vox that has so much movement speed and ability to maneuver between the team fights, especially with Vanguard speed ups and splashdown speed ups. Harmonious tried to make the carry play. It just didn't work out here, and Ace going to take these crystal turrets.
The champions of Korea show why they are regarded as one of the favorites for the tournament. They take down Hunters in the first game. We do still have 1 game left in this series, of course, but Ace looking very strong in game 1.
Certainly. What a fantastic performance by them, and a composition that we said so many times throughout this game would be valuable in the late game against what Hunters had drafted. It was very difficult for Hunters to do much in that late game. It was really having to be the mid and early game domination that they were looking for, and they weren't quite able to get it against Ace Gaming, who played such a very calculated early game. Once more, we get to see the clash of metas, the clash of rotations, East Asia's ability to be so safe and so cautious in how they position, knowing full well where they want to fight and what objectives they want to take, and Hunter's forced aggression wasn't met.
Yeah, it wasn't. And I think what East Asia do so well generally as a region is the willingness not to make mistakes. They say, we'll take the low percentage play, the easier play, we won't make a gamble, and then when we get to our power spikes, when creation gets to 3 or 4 items, then we'll start taking these trades. They did it incredibly well in that game. I'm wondering what Hunters do and switch around for game 2.
Yeah, no, me too as well, because I think for Hunters, they need to find that early aggression, particularly in the jungle. Alpha's a hero that can do it, for sure, but there are other picks very valuable on 2.10 that they can start to consider. Yeah, Koshko has come back full circle into the meta, and Koshko was such a valuable pick at 2016 World Championships. It would be very interesting if here in the 2017 World Championships she became such a priority as well, considering the fact that on 2.10 she hasn't even seen much play, around the live patch, and so it really shows the value in competitive to have a hero that can shut down the enemy jungler so well, and when you have a team that can kind of pull across that and allow for that and facilitate that, and then can move into a late game presence, it shows that Koshka is still a very valuable pick here. And I'm not sure if it's something that Hunters are going to pull out particularly, but it's something they consider for sure.
Hunters now sitting at 1 and 2, of course, in their overall standings. Will be looking to win this game to keep that 50% win-loss across the group.
Yep.
You feel like if you go to 1 and 3, it's unlikely that you'll be able to get through. But of course, TSM have to play up against Ace later on.
Yes.
And with Ace looking this strong, will TSM be able to take games off them?
It's a good question. Like we mentioned,
I like to ask good questions.
It is,
I feel like bad questions.
I feel like that's
Dowsy,
kind of your job.
What's your hair doing isn't the best of questions, but are TSM going to be able to be Ace is a much better question.
Yes, and TSM have shown that at live events they can prepare for these international threats very well. Mobile Masters, like I mentioned, Mobile Masters, I want to just preface this, is a gauntlet-style tournament, a bit more fun than perhaps the seriousness and the prestige of the World Championship. However, it is definitely a live setting tournament in Vainglory, so it's very important to read into it in some form, and TSM were able to take down Ace in a best of 1. Yep. Best of 2s are essentially double best of 1s. Yeah. And so, in theory, that first game of the best of 2 is just a best of 1 that TSM can really look to upset that first game and potentially gain momentum and try and figure out what Ace have been doing in the autumn season so far. So, looking forward to that series just through the fact that TSM have a track record against Ace Gaming, but coming back full circle towards Hunters, who, like you mentioned, are 1-2 now. They need to pull something out here. They need to be able to find a draft that is able to shut down Ace. And I think what they struggled with there in the previous game was providing Ace too many tools to be able to play their style in the draft. The Arden and the Lorelei with a hyper carry Vox is just something that is so typical East Asia and so typical of the playstyle they want to go for, which is that calculated early game into late game presence. And so Hunters need to consider that in their draft. You can have strategical drafts that just remove things that you don't want to play against rather than what you believe the other team plays very well. And for Hunters, if they need to win that early game and get that aggression throughout the game to be able to take down the Korean overlords, then that's exactly what I would be considering right now.
The Korean Overlords didn't really show up on day 1, but it seems like they're showing up on day 2 at the moment. I wonder how you actually change draft them, because we saw, Blackfeather being banned out, we saw the early Lyra pick. How do you actually remove the ability for a team to just go around and build around a hyper carry?
Yeah, no, well, you need to obviously have a hypercarry to begin with. You need to consider which hypercarry you're going to go for. Baron is very different to Vox, is very different to Celeste. And so, first of all, you decide the vulnerability of your hypercarry. Vox is probably the safest of them all because of his own innate movement ability. And when you pair that with heroes, that it gives him even more movement to be able to chase down. Because he has such a short range, he needs to be able to do that. And so, it really just depends on where they're going with this, what kind of hype carriers they're going for. We see Ace banning out Baron here, so clearly not wanting to allow Hunters to play that. It was a ban in the previous game as well.
There's the Lyra being removed by Hunters as well. So Ace do still have the option of going for something a little bit aggressive here. The Churnwalker being left open means that they will select that for themselves.
I think that Churnwalker is potentially the strongest hero in competitive play outright. His playmaking ability is so huge. Torment as an ability, Trespass as an ability provides so much CC. But, you know, if you were to play a game with a Churnwalker in just a ranked game and then go check the API stats of how much damage you deal, you're up there with the jungler because of the way Churnwalker's damage amplifies any damage dealt to hooked and chained targets that your teammates are able to damage. And so the thing about Churnwalker that is very difficult to deal with is the fact that you essentially have 3 damage threats, and one of them is a captain who's providing so much CC utility for his team as well. And so it's a very influential pick. Hunters need to have a method to deal with the Churnwalker. Lorelai's going to come through, and Lorelai, of course, is able to provide movement speed to disengage the Churnwalker, a stun, a root that can, you know, lock him up in place so you can break those hook and chains. And of course, if things get very hairy and dicey, then you have that water wall to provide so much shielding and protection to your carrier jungler.
Yeah, it gets rid of the stun as well, of course, from the Trespass. So we'll have to see how Hunters are going to use this. Can, of course, go for the roam at Lorelai. Could have take it into the jungle or even the lane. We talked a little bit about that in game 1. We'll wait to see how it develops throughout this draft. Now looking for the next ban. A lot of options still available for Hunters here. We'll probably want to keep the Sky up for themselves, but could take away Krull, could take away Blackfeather.
I think you ban Kestrel here against Creation, or Vox as well is a fantastic ban. It really is the one you feel like you can't deal with the most. Vox, because of his Sonic Zoom, of course, it allows him to be so aggressive. Kestrel, though, with a Churnwalker is very difficult to deal with, and so Hunter's going to have to be careful. Potentially, they can pick it now to take that away from Ace Gaming. That Rona ban coming through means Blackfeather has been left open in this draft completely. Blackfeather is actually not as good into Churnwalker as you may consider. So Ace Gaming knows this potentially and are baiting out the pick.
Yeah, it will be picked up by Hunters, so we'll have to wait and see how Ace Gaming are able to react to that. There's so many different options for Ace here. Do they go for a hyper carry? Is that the only style they have as a team, or do they have a lot of different options they can delve into? Because it could be that Hunters have felt like we can deal with a hyper carry if we get the Lorelai and the Blackfeather, and Ace Gaming just gonna be like, okay, we'll just play a full team fight team. We don't need to play around hyper carries.
It's very difficult because Lorelai Blackfeather is a very offensive combination we talked about in the draft of game 1, that the Lorelai providing the water wall to the Blackfeather makes him practically unkillable, and the Vox ban coming through makes it very difficult for Ace Gaming to deal with. Kestrel is a hero that Creation is very well renowned for, and it compared with the Churnwalker very well, but Blackfeather fairly good into a Kestrel, and so you have to kind of stress test that ability to deal with the Blackfeather as a Churnwalker, and if you can keep that Kestrel alive. This Petal pick coming through, very much likely going to be a Crystal Power Petal in the jungle. Never mind, it's Weapon Power potentially in the lane. Alpha's locked in.
We never really know with Ace Gaming. They have so much flexibility and versatility in the draft. It could be Weapon Power Churnwalker in lane for all we know.
No, it's not. If there's one thing I know to be true, it's not that. The rest of them, Medic, I will give you. But wow, Weapon Power Petal has come through. In 2.10, Petal is in a tough spot. I believe the Tornado Trigger changes came through as well as a 5% nerf on her trampoline, weapon power amp, and crystal power amp. It doesn't mean she's impossible. She provides so much burst potential, but I'm not sure this is the pick you want against a Black Feather because of the fact that he's going to have so much sustained damage, tanky stats, as well as a water wall to keep him alive. It seems a little bit off the wall to come from Ace Gaming, but I'm really excited to see how they pull it through. That Samuel last pick coming out is actually going to be very vulnerable to the petal, and so that's something that Hunters have to be aware of. But now they have zone control as well as a massive ability to engage a team fight as well, so it's something that Ace are going to have to be particularly cautious of. However, when you dive a Churnwalker, that's when Churnwalker can thrive in a team fight.
Do Hunters actually need to dive the Churnwalker with the Samuel? Can they poke down and then when the Churnwalker's low, go in for the engage? Is that what they're kind of trying to do with this competition?
Yeah, especially with the Samuel, you definitely, with a Dragon's Eye, look to poke down as much as possible. Samuel on 2.10 is sleeper OP, but he requires an immense amount of mechanical skill to keep your Dragon's Eye stacks alive because of the fact that they fall off after 4 seconds, 3 stacks a second. That is very, very hard. Sorry, it's 2.5 seconds, not 4 seconds. After 2.5 seconds, 3 stacks a second. So that means that you have to consistently keep the Dragon's Eye stacking. You do this by auto attack, you do this by Malice and Verdicts in the Drifting Dark, of course. But if you drop those Dragon's Eyes, your team fights suddenly become far less threatening to the opponent. And so, yes, you can poke down with a Samuel, especially at the beginning of a team fight. And if the poke damage is enough to Petal, who is extremely squishy, then Black Feather can just dive on in with a Water War to keep himself alive and take down Creation. So this draft here is far more has far more potential for Hunters to play that Chinese aggressive style against Ace here, and I like it for what they're strong at.
Ace were very good in the first game of reacting, playing defensively early on when they needed to, not taking trades, so we'll have to see if Hunters are able to actually find those avenues, find those pathways into the jungle of Ace Gaming. But once again, we're on to the Halcyon Fold for Game 2 of Day 2 of the Vainglory World Championships. Hunters up against Ace, 1 game down in this series. For a moment, I wondered if Harmonious might have been sneaky and gone for a CP Black Feather here, only because I can never really predict the drafts coming out from Hunters, but it looks like it is going to be weapon power on that Black Feather. Yeah,
no, it would be a surprise to me if he does switch on over to the Crystal Power Black Feather. But now that you've brought it up, it is definitely not an impossibility due to the fact that the range advantage that would come out of the composition from Hunters.
Oh, good steal.
Yeah, nice little.
Sorry, I like to see it when Romans steal them because that's what I try and do at the start of every game, and I never get them. So when someone else steals it, I'm like, yeah, good job, Godfather.
You appreciate it. Have to show the respect here. It's an interesting proposition you bring up here, Medic, because Hunters could then just play a range game and poke from afar, and it would be pretty difficult, I think, for Ace Gaming to deal with, especially once that Black Feather hits the on-point overdrive at level 8. We'll see now he's going to backport, has gold to buy. If Crystal Power bits come through, then we know he's going towards it. No, it's a weapon power bit. So it is going to be what we expected here, which is good into Petal due to the fact that he can kind of deal with the offensive crit build that these Petals prioritize.
Interesting to see minion candy used by Hunters as well to try and push up that lane. We didn't see too many of them in game 1, but yesterday there were a lot of minion cannons being used by both teams to try and get the pressure in the lane, to try and get the push advantage.
Minion candy is such a powerful asset, and it's so cheap to use as well. It allows you to rotate out of lane, and what Harmonious did there was go back, purchase, and get a back rotation with Swagu, which puts him in a massive advantage over Creation, not only in gold but experience as well. You need to get that Black Feather to level 8 quicker, as quick as possible, so you have those on points, extra range, and it provides the poke from range as well as the slow that's going to be needed to really lock down Creation.
As we come into this game, we talked a little bit about Hunter's playstyle, waiting for that poke, allowing Harmonious then to dive onto Creation in the backline. What are we looking for from Ace Gaming? Because you've got this Alpha who can be aggressive, saw it from Hunters in the last game, and then you've got Weapon Power Petal, which takes a bit of time, really, to scale into the game.
Yeah, it does. And so for this Petal skin here, sorry,
for the Petal skin,
well, no, it's
out of this world, isn't it?
It's pew 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 Petal. And so when you you stack your attack speed, it's very annoying. to listen to if you're on the opposite team, and it's very fun when it's on your team because you know that you're tilting the opponents just by auto attacks alone. Yeah, this petal here wants to be as aggressive as possible. She struggles into Samuel due to the range. If this was a crystal power petal, she would struggle even more because those minions get taken out, but minions are just not a thing for weapon power petal. Creation looking for the Sorrow Blade, and he's looking to get tornado triggers online so he can just jump in with the trampoline weapon power amp and do as much damage very quickly to Swagoo.
Both teams going aggressive in the jungle, not being able to steal away the Treants, but Creation has to be careful because of that Drifting Dark. Swagoo, the healing flask has already been used by Creation. Trying to get the damage out. There's a great double fish food as well, and Hunters, the early aggressive jungle plays into Ace.
And Ace kind of got stuck between a rock and a hard place there. Tassa was stuck in the lane, and Creation was stuck in the jungle. Role reversal, which was not something they really wanted to be dealing with. They needed to be, as a unit, to deal with the early aggression as Samuel Lorelei can provide. Samuel's still one of the premier invader junglers just due to the fact that at level 2 he has such a massive power spike with that Drifting Dark Malice and Verdict combination, and so it's very difficult for Ace Gaming to deal with if they get caught in a mistake. And early mistakes like that, the forced aggression Hunters can perform, is what they need to be doing if they want to really snowball ahead of the Ace Gaming roster.
And once again, it's a timing thing. You look at it, they're going at 3 minutes 30, they get the aggression down, and then they back away before the jungle intensifies. And that's something we saw from Hunters in Game 1 as well. So I'm really liking that aggression.
Man, Harmonious has such an crazy CS lead over Creation as well. This is so non-typical of Creation, who normally is one of the monstrous CSs in the game, but that early mistake in the jungle, getting caught on up and then in fact losing his life, has put him immensely behind at this point, close to 20 CS at the 5-minute mark. Harmonious has finished the Serpent's Mask and is going towards armor to protect himself against what will be a crit-focused petal.
Youngju caught up in the clam there. Swagoo trying to put the damage down. Harmonious goes deep. The Oblivion doesn't connect. Tassa there. The Trespass will pull them back. And there's damage coming down on towards the Ace members. They've been forced back behind their turret. Still not 6 on Creation as well. So it doesn't have that spontaneous combustion to try and defend. But I don't think Hunters can go for much more here.
Really, the spontaneous combustion is about healing more than anything on the weapon power format. Here's that Drifting Dark, but there was no energy for Swagoo. He had to wait a little bit, potentially not looking at his energy bar there. So the siege potential from Hunters lost a little bit due to the fact that there's no energy regen yet in the kit of Swagoo, something I'm sure he'll change very shortly.
Has already got the Dragon's Eye, so we'll start trying to stack that up. We need to keep an eye on those stacks, of course, in these fights. So vital for Hunters that he keeps them nice and high. Creation getting dived here, but the spontaneous combustion is available for him as he heals up a little bit. Hunters trying to put some damage down on the turret as Harmonious bags away. Still 26 seconds before he can use that Rose offensive. Swagoo trying to tank it up, and Harmonious is caught out. But already Creation is down, and Harmonious is still alive somehow. Eventually falls a 1-for-1 trade under the jungle, under the tower of Ace.
That was definitely turning a bad situation into a good one by Hunters, but it's not over yet.
Tassa goes in with the Prime Directive, but Swagoo low on energy, goes down into the Infinite Reboot. That's not what you want to see if you're an Ace Gaming fan, and now they're chased onto Youngju as well. The Fish Food doesn't connect, but the final auto attack's not quite enough because the Fountain was used by that Churn Walker to keep himself safe.
Yeah, Tassa going to be kicking himself for not activating the termination protocol there. Here comes this engage from Swagoo. Going to push Creation back and do damage to the turret. It should go down fairly easily. Hunters have such an early game advantage right now. 2,000 gold is so big against a weapon power petal. She is so late game reliant. She has a Sorrow Blade, but she needs to get at least 2 tornado triggers before she even becomes threatening to the Hunters roster. And if Hunters can continue holding her down, drowning her from gold, then their ability to come back into this series and potentially cause that tie-breaker scenario that we fear could come from this group, then it's going to be a game like this that Hunters need to do it in.
It's the strong early aggression we've talked about. The Chinese region is famed for it. We saw it from Kraken yesterday, and now we're seeing it from Hunters as well. But you can't count Ace Gaming out at any point. They're very good at coming back from a deficit, and I'm sure they have a game plan in mind after they've fallen behind early on here.
Swagoo with the Clockwork second. I'm loving the Clockwork prioritization by these teams here. It's something that the Western regions haven't quite clocked onto, is the fact that you just build Clockwork whenever. Doesn't really matter. Build it here, build it there, build it everywhere. and it provides so much threat. You know, on the Celeste earlier on yesterday from Team Kraken, it was just impossible to deal with, and it was a first item purchase for Celeste as well. It makes sense. When you buy Clockwork, you get your Supernova basically coming out every 2 seconds, which is huge damage ampage, and so it makes so much sense that Clockwork would be prioritized. Going to see a gold miner started up.
Has been spotted by Ace as well. There's the Torment to bring them back. The gold miner goes down, taken out by the Churnwalker, and Ace Gaming might look for a bit of a trade here. Harmonious forced back. Oblivion doesn't connect as well, and Ace will just try and get away, but a good fish food will stun up Yongju. Engage with the Rose offensive, continuing to trade in. So Agu is doing a lot of work in this fight. The Crystal Sentry's going to join him up as well. One down for Ace. Hunters now need to back away because the Termination Protocol is going to come out from Tassa, and Creation is still able to put some damage down from the side, but 2 kills for Hunters and that Crystal Sentry as well.
You hear people talk about this interaction of Black Feather into Alpha so often. When Alpha goes into her Termination Protocol, her health is reduced to 1. When she goes into a reboot process, her health is reduced to 0. And Black Feather's A is in missing health execute, so he does so much damage with that Faint of Heart, not Faint of Heart, so much damage, it is Faint of Heart, into Alpha, regardless of how many Heartthrob stats he has generated, just due to the fact he literally has no HP.
Yeah.
And so Tassa needs to really do some significant damage. I wouldn't be surprised if he even goes Clockwork as a 3rd item after this Broken Myth, so that he can reboot within 2 seconds and try and make sure that doesn't happen in these team fights. Swagu's found Tassa caught out at the back of his jungle, but they might not look for to push it because this turret is pushed on up and they can really get some damage down.
And that's what you want to do. Even if you can't get the kills, or if you have to chase too far for the kills, you then go back into the lane, get some pressure down on towards the turrets when you can, and that's what Hunters are doing very well at the moment. 10 minutes in, they are 3,000 gold ahead. So much quicker than in Game 1, where it saw a long time before we really got going.
Creation is definitely struggling here. That's going to be the turret falling to Hunters press forward. Yes, they do.
Good fish food. Harmonious jumps in though with the Rose offensive, gets stunned up, and now it's onto Tassa to try and do some damage. Goes into the Termination Protocol, but doesn't get the damage off. Creation still only sitting at 1 tornado trigger. 2 members of his team will fall, and he cannot get the damage down onto the rest of Hunters, who are looking unstoppable this game.
Yeah, the burst from Harmonious there just really makes that point we talked about earlier so much more threatening when you just see him lose all of his HP in that reboot protocol. That's going to be another Crystal Sentry going down. Hunters are stealing so much away from Ace Gaming. Almost a full jungle clear coming through from them, as well as that Sentry is just causing so much issue for Tassa. They've already put Creation behind, now they're putting Tassa behind, and Ace Gaming need to have someone who can at least hold the fort if they want to be able to go head to toe with Hunters, and right now they have no one who can do so. Creation is getting closer and closer to that second tornado trigger, but who can he prioritize on the enemy team? If he jumps forward into a team fight, then Harmonious says, thank you, you did my job for me. If he tries to go into Swagu, then Godfather puts a water wall on top of him. Godfather has a Clockwork as well, so he can put 2 water walls onto Swagu in a team fight. It is ridiculously difficult for Ace Gaming to find any win conditions in these team fights and execute upon them, and Hunter's draft as well as early execution has just made this game pretty much impossible for Ace Gaming to come back.
Never want to count them out, though. We've seen Ace Gaming make a lot of comebacks in the past, but Hunter's looking incredibly strong as this game does progress. A Metal Jacket finished on towards Harmonious. The second tornado trigger is there for Creation, so you need to watch both this Black Feather and that Petal, who has been caught out slightly. Swagu doing a lot of work with those Manus and Verdicts. There is the fish food as well, the stun onto Yongju as he gets forced back. And Hunters, the dominant team in China, losing only 1 game throughout the last split, are now looking dominant against the best team in Korea. And once again, East Asia just not looking as strong as we expected them to as a region here in the World Championships.
Yeah, this is going to be a turret threatened and siege. Does Tassa engage as Yongju? We have to see. This is their moment if they want to have it.
Pull back onto Swagu, looking for the engage. Tassa goes in, but the fish food stun is in a perfect position. Tassa's now trying to retreat as Harmonious jumps forward the Oblivion. A little bit too late there from Hunters as Ace get back behind their turret, but as soon as that barrier falls off, that turret is going to go down because you've got so much poke from Swagu and from Harmonious. The turret falls, Third of the game for Hunters, who have yet to lose one of their own. Ace Gaming just once again retreat back. They realize they cannot quite take a fight yet.
Yeah, and that's a very scary thing to see from them, because there was a really big opportunity for them to engage on to Swagoo and stun up both Godfather and Swagoo and potentially burst him down in that period of a stun, so that they can at least remove one of the Hunters members, and they did not want to execute upon that, clearly threatened by the power that Hunters have demonstrated so far. Choke point turret going down so easily for Hunters pre-13 minutes has just set the pace of this series and really put the pressure onto Ace Gaming even further, because for this next minute and a half, Hunters are just going to spend time taking away jungle from Ace Gaming and securing this last gold miner of the game for themselves, putting even further the gold differential between these two teams when the Kraken spawns. Maybe Ace go for an all-or-nothing play. This is a time that you could kind of get away with it, because it may be difficult for Ace Gaming to push into the base and take stuff, but no, it is not going to be the case. Of course, Ace want to play a more calculated game style. They have to be very careful here as Hunters move on in. Spotted up in the jungle, but it is jungle just being taken away nonetheless. And the gold lead, it gets further and further apart. Tassa further and further pushed down. Creation not having the influence on this weapon power petal, and I think people expected that weapon power petal would fall off in a heavy way on this update, and you can kind of see it here from Creation. He just has not had any influence on this game, and if you pick weapon power petal, you need to be the boss of the game, and so far it's just not happened.
It's the boss of the minions at the moment. He can take those down, but not really take down any members of Hunters. TSM will be looking at this game and pretty happy with it thus far, because if both these teams draw and TSM takes a 2-0 win, they take first spot in this group. It's a possibility for them.
Yeah, not only that, it would mean that Hunters would go through... Sorry. Yeah, if it's 2-0, Hunters would go through as second place, and that would be East Asia eliminated from our World Championship. The former World Champions and the region that hosts them eliminated in 2017. That would be a twist that no one was expecting. We'll have to see how that does unfold when North America meets Asia, East Asia very shortly.
Yep, that is the series going on after this game concludes. The Kraken has been started though by Hunters. They want to try and close this game out pretty quickly. Youngju there in the front line looking for the hook and chain. Creation with the flank. Harmonious in that front line of Ace, but Creation jumps in, getting a lot of damage down onto Swaggy, but Harmonious is doing a lot of work as well. Creation somehow surviving. Harmonious will take him down, and now it's up to Tassa to take out the Black Feather, but the heals coming out from Godfather are pretty big. The shields, Harmonious gets one. Tassa, what can you do in a 1v2? You have to do it for Ace. You have to do it for East Asia, but he cannot quite get onto that back line. Godfather standing in the front. The front direct is going to go in, but look at the water wall. Termination protocol on towards Harmonious. It's not enough damage, and Harmonious will be able to take out Tassa before he comes back up. An ace for Hunters, and they'll take the Kraken as well.
Yeah, I think Tassa was really pretty much condemned to a death there because of the excellent body blocking coming out from Godfather. Also, Tassa's build, this Broken Myth-oriented build, very good for burst damage, but not as good for the sustained that Dragon's Eye can provide. It's a very conscious decision you have to make as an alpha, whether you want to burst someone down, and considering the fact they need to remove Swagger very quickly, it makes sense. But then, in that scenario where very likely Petal will be dead because she's had to dive into the team fight, it means that can you 2v2 a Black Feather? We just saw he could not. Hunters have unleashed the Kraken onto Ace Gaming now. This next team fight is that all-or-nothing god play from Ace Gaming. They will have infusions ready to go. Creation is going to have some armor to try and deal with Harmonious as well. But if they're not able to take down Swagger in a similar fashion, then they might not be able to defend against this Kraken.
And this is it if you're Ace. Hunters, last game of group stage for them, quite possibly. Youngju down to about half as Harmonious now dives in. Creation trying to get on towards that backline. Swagger's taking a lot of hurt, but so has Creation, and he will fall first. And you have to feel perhaps that's just the fight one already for Hunters. What can Ace do? What can Tassa do? Up against the two carries from Hunters who are seeking out their prey. Tassa will fall, and Youngju's like, I've got a chain, I guess. But that chain is not enough to help them win the fight. Hunters take another ace, and with the Kraken, will be able to push in and take the vein. to equalize this series at 1-1. A superb performance by them, and it takes them 2-2 across the group. Great chance to get through to the quarterfinals later today.
Group D, the group of death, demonstrating its name here. One apiece so far across of all of the games played. And this next series, TSM versus Ace Gaming, has the potential to decide it all for either Ace or TSM.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
Incredible.
Ace have the potential to hold their fate in their hands.
We could have a three-way tie as well.
Or we could have a three-way tie. That is what is going to come through of here. This is insane. And in a three-way tie, then we go back to another round robin between all these three teams. There's so many tiebreaker scenarios that I'm not going to get into them now because we don't have to just yet. No. But wow, what an incredible performance from these teams. And I just love it when metas clash like this. Forced aggression, raw damage comes out from pure, calculated, cautious, but very aggressive when it needs to be play is the East Asia region. And when those metas clash, you get some amazing Vainglory.
You have to give a lot of credit to Hunters as well. After that first game, it looked like they were very much on the ropes, didn't understand how to play up against Ace Gaming, but they adapted, they improvised, and they were able to come back and take the second game. I think we're going to go to a quick break before we lead into our next game, which is going to be TSM up against Ace Gaming. Quite possibly the last game of the group stages here in Vainglory Worlds. We'll have to wait and see, but we'll join you right after these messages.